I wanted to start by just asking, to what extent do people feel like this framework, did I kind of cover the breadth, or did I miss big chunks of areas? Like if we're going to try to think about each of these stages and how can we improve? Anyone have suggestions for anything that I missed that is important for us to talk about?
Maybe a question about web platform tests. And how do we currently determine whether a feature that actually goes out is shipped has sufficient web platform tests in terms of breadth, but also depth? And how do we ensure that we hit those marks?
Yeah, and I think there's two questions there. Do we have sufficient testing is an important question, and this is something Vivian told me to mention, and I totally forgot. I'm sorry, Vivian. But we have some great code coverage tools. Where did I put that? Yeah, right. So if people aren't aware, right, like Garrett now gives you full coverage feedback, and so like this is part of why we want to make sure we've got good test coverage, and hopefully the code coverage tooling helps us with that. But then there's I think the second question of what you're raising, Kadir, which is like where's our split between what is a unit test versus what platform test, and certainly for anything that's web exposed. We might want some unit tests for small bits of functionality, but we really want our integrations tests to be web platform tests that we're sharing them with other browsers.
Well, I think it's also code coverage. That's great to test the code that's actually written, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're following the spec.
Yeah.
All the features are implemented are in the spec.
Yep.
Do we have a method to?
I don't know. Panos?
This has been coming up. How comprehensive is our web test coverage with respect to the actual feature that they're testing? And I don't know that we have a great answer so far. We know that it's a problem in some cases, but I don't think we have even identified precisely which tests are or which areas have a limited test availability. I will say that the new webstatus.dev dashboard kind of helps you see like the scope of the problem, because there are many cases where we know the tests are not comprehensive. We don't show the score because it's just misleading. But we need to do more there.
I think most of the bad regressions I've seen probably wouldn't be helped by those. A lot of those are kind of, hey, I fixed the spec compliance issue and I updated the web platform test. And a lot of times it's, more subtle race conditions or the, second order effects. So yeah, I think the tests are great to make sure, we're not regressing things later from an interop perspective, but I feel like in my experience most of the really bad things wouldn't be helped a ton by WPTs.
One other thing I want for the regression thing, something sometimes happens is test fails, test gets disabled, maybe a bug gets filed, but just then the bug might not even make it to the right team, or like we regress something and the right people don't know that we regressed it, even though the test called it. And
you think is that specific to web platform tests, or you think for any test failure that happens?
Any test failure, really, or even if the team just realize it and like forget about it.
Yeah, I mean that's always a challenge. I think I had that on my list somewhere of just like everybody has lots to do, right? And prioritization is always a challenge. Yoav, go ahead.
So I wanted to say that regarding code coverage tools, they were great. In the last few months, I'm not sure when that regressed, but they basically don't cover WPTs in some weird and exciting ways. And I have full CLs that say basically you have zero test coverage, where I have there are parts of the code that are very obviously covered, and the code coverage tools tell me that they're not. So I think that there has been some regressions there recently, and I currently I'm not sure who to bug about this, but it would be great if there was, an address and mailing list, something that I could, ping and point them to these obvious shortages in code coverage.
Yeah, sure. So I think the correction is WPT test. We do have test coverage in there. However, we don't have test coverage if it's a test itself is a JavaScript related test. So we only cover C++. Another thing is if like we have a two, like in the CL review, you have a regular Garrett test coverage, and we also have the absolutely test coverage tools that you can really. I think you're referring to the absolutely test coverage, correct?
I'm referring to Garrett, like basically the brown color, like brown background on the left side of like.
Yeah. I think that's incremental, the Garrett coverage. So and that if you find any like. I don't think we have full control of that, but if you find anything that in the incremental is not correctly showing coverage, you can file a bug for our the test coverage tooling team. I'll probably, is that a place to share?
I mean, why don't you might as well just put it into the notes, and you can drop the link to the notes doc into the chat. Maybe.
Okay, I will put everything in the notes for which component to actually file bug to.
Okay, cool. I will do that. And other than that, I wanted to say, like, this entire conversation is around bugs. But we also have cases where we have explicit regression, like web platform removals or things along those lines, where we are explicitly saying we want to change the web exposed behavior and in ways that will be felt in the world, but hopefully not too bad. And that's even a trickier, like an even more fine line to thread. What are, like, our thoughts there haven't changed, right? This is all just I mean, this is.
I attempted to include that here as well, because I mean, often what happens with those is like we try to avoid landing those regressions, right? That's what's on this slide, and we have, for example, our web compat tools like mix counters and HTTP archive and all that. We maybe most importantly, we have our, anytime we know we're making a breaking change, we go through a public intent process, and the API owners try to use their expertise in web compatibility. We have this Blink Principles of Web Compatibility document that I wrote years ago that has, like, how do we reason about web compatibility risk? But all of that is only in this very first step, right? And when we get it wrong, all these other steps still apply, right? Somebody files a bug somewhere that something's broken, more than we thought it was, and we still have to do all this.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that's about time to detect.
Yeah.
On folks who are wrong about the risk, right? Like, some breakage is okay, but like a bunch of stuff is broken. And I guess all these steps, it might be interesting to look at, like, what leads to longer time to detect, and like somewhat anecdotal, but I found if I ask a customer to bisect things, they get slightly overwhelmed, right? Like, I've got to have the right Python environment. Is all the documentation up to date? It used to be like Omaha proxy, like that thing's not there anymore. So, like, how do I pick a revision range, or do I just do the major versions?
Yeah.
So I don't know if the Chrome team has had similar things, but like that might be one interesting thing. Like, could we make the bisect for just average consumer so easy that when they do file a bug, that we quickly understand, like, well, this website is broken because of that intentional API change, right? Because a lot of time that linkage is unclear unless someone spends a lot of time going through it.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, in general, if we can do the bisect, I think it's always better to just have us do it. But are you're talking about the cases that
there are a lot of enterprise things where it's like they can't give us the environment, and it's like it would be so helpful if you could bisect it, and if they're motivated enough, they do figure it out. But on average, it seems like it's not consistent that they're willing to do it.
And so we are having the discussion right now. Unfortunately, we have this challenge that we're not allowed to make unofficial Chrome builds available publicly. There's like some legal thing, I don't know. But we have a Chromium build archive, but that's not per revision. And so now we're analyzing. I think Vivian's team is looking at, maybe we can do something there where, maybe we use the Chrome for testing builds, for example. But a lot of this comes down to, okay, what's it going to cost us? Like, actually creating each of these builds is rather expensive. And so,
and even
I think that's a good.
Yeah, even the Chromium commit range is usually enough
Really?
For us, I mean, it gets us 95% of the way
We're
there.
done.
Okay.
Well, to be
But you're
clear,
saying
like,
it's too hard. The problem you're seeing is that it's too hard to run.
some of the Python script's a little like, like again, I'm fine, but I've seen on average people are like, I don't understand what you're asking me to do, or that seems too difficult. And yeah, like you get like usually a range of like, I don't know, 20 to 40 commits maybe out of it, which is like, it's not great, but if you have like a general sense of the problem and you stare at the commit log, it's super helpful still. It is painful because yeah, they are Chromium builds, so it doesn't have like proprietary codecs with FFmpeg. So like there's certain classes of things where it's like, this doesn't repro at all in any of these, even though we know the regression was somewhere there. So to be clear, yes, if you can have some official Chrome build somewhere, like that'd be awesome too.
I think that we might be able to do it for Chrome for testing, right? Because we already have Chrome for testing builds, which are, but I mean, they're somewhere in between Chromium and Chrome builds. But what about Edge?
But they're more frequent?
Well, they're not today. I mean, but you know, we could make them more frequent if we're willing to pay the cost.
Yeah, so like just for Edge, you know, we can also bisect Edge builds, but you know, the way we ingest Chromium changes means we often have hundreds or thousands of commits between the build that was fine and the one that's working. And our next step is always like, okay, well, let's do a Chromium bisect, because that'll get us, you know, from that 1,000 commits, maybe a range of 20. And
I've seen too many cases where we do a bisect and someone guesses, oh, I think it's this CL, and it goes to that person. And they say, oh, no, I don't think it's me. It must be somebody else on the list. And it's like this game of guessing, like which of these 40 CLs is actually responsible. And you're right. Sometimes it's easy, but
well, it's better than 1,000.
yeah, that's true. But I think we should just put more, like when we do the per revision bisecting, you get usually one. What is it, like a large fraction of the time it's down to one CL, sometimes it's 2 or 3.
Yeah, so nowadays in the Windows and Mac and Android, all those, we can down to like 1 or 2 to 3 the most.
Yeah.
Like, but for others like an iOS right now, we haven't been able to do that yet. Right now, it's most just per view, but we are working on to getting it to per revision as well. And for the external, like Rick just said, we are investigating in if the Chrome for testing build, if we can just make it down to maybe it's not perfectly like 1 CL, but even if like just 4 or 5, like it's much easier to.
No, that'd be awesome. And even if it was still just as many commits as the Chromium one, the whole proprietary codecs thing, like it'd still be much better, right? Like we've seen tons of instances where it's.
Is codecs the big difference that you've seen?
Well, if you get a WebRTC regression, it's like.
Does anyone know if Chrome for testing has all the same codecs as Chrome? I actually don't know.
I just removed it because I think I spot on the CL, but I'm not 100% sure they have WebRTC and.
Yeah, but if you get one of those, then it's like someone's manually building to bisect, basically, which is horrible.
There are no proprietary codec for the testing build. We need another local build for the WebRTC streaming test.
And you're talking. So I know there isn't in Chromium, but you mean even Chrome for testing?
Yeah.
There's no proprietary codecs.
Maybe I can remember.
What are you saying then?
I wonder if, like, maybe a crazy idea, but rather than making more builds available or whatever, would it make sense to host like a VM instance or whatever that we could hand out to like enterprises or whatever that could potentially have this?
It does the rebuilds?
Does the bisect, like has all the tooling set up, whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I find that you can't redistribute it. So I guess I don't know, like, what am I remoting into that you're okay letting me see?
Exactly.
I don't know. Anyway, I think that's an obvious area for further exploration, potential investment.
So yeah, anyway, I love the bisect, even with the current thing and all the warts, if we could make it easier for some of these customers with like super esoteric repros. Would probably be good.
I think down to like 20 commits is still easy because usually you have a local build that you can just try to reverse the one that you think is the one, and then when you go with that information, it makes it a lot more difficult to say it's not me if reverting this one fixes the issue.
I worry it's easy for experts like us who understand Chromium, and it's not scalable, right?
But getting this process easier then means that the last mile of me like getting to try the revert and so on gets easier because I'd skip the 1,000 commits step, which I do sometimes.
Yeah. Other people have other suggestions. I think I can go to my notes slide, but I really wanted to hear, where do people see low hanging fruit here? Do people have ideas of all these are trade-offs, right? We can invest more, we can slow ourselves down more, but where are there win-win opportunities? What are people's judgment on things that we can invest in that would likely, be net benefit for the whole project?
Maybe one small thing. It's about the Finch key switch. I'm a downstream consumer of Chromium, so we embed Chromium in. Whenever there's a bug with a new release, it seems weird. Doesn't seem related to ARC or anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it because a Finch feature? Is there a key switch that I should enable in my local bit because we don't get them? So I'm wondering if it would be useful to just make it part of the process to just announce it on embedder dev or something like this when a key switch is used, so embedders can turn off the feature.
Right. So one of the key properties that I think we've occasionally messed up, but the principle is anytime we're sending something to 100%, and that includes a kill switch, right? If you're going to set a kill switch, you're required to first land a change to trunk, and so that I think your suggestion of maybe we should announce whenever we use a kill switch, that's probably a good one, but also it should be the case that before we use a kill switch, it's already landed on trunk that we've disabled this thing.
Many embedders just follow stable, they don't follow trunk.
Oh, I see.
So we don't get those. And usually I just wait for the next stable refresh because I'm like, maybe the respin, we just include the key switch head.
Yeah.
But I think it would be nice just to know what's going on because it's the first thing I do.
Automate that too, because we can tell when we're changing the configuration that sets a kill switch. So maybe rather than rely on
Yeah, some visibility, like if it could also have an association with a bug of go stare here, so you can figure out is this kill switch applicable to me as an embedder or not.
Right.
Because I don't think you use key switch so much in Chrome. I think it's quite rare, right?
It's fairly rare. I mean, I don't know. How often do we do a kill switch? Like probably I would say about once a release. There's one that we need to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they tend to be not.
For release? Yeah, for feature. It's for feature, right?
Yeah, for how often do we do an emergency set a kill switch to turn a feature off due to a regression?
Oh, so
Right?
okay. So the number is like just for the incidents. No, for now, 40% of it's related to Finch feature, but in there, how many actually we decomplicate? Sometimes they're even like not just one Finch feature. Because there's multiple Finch feature, the permutation actually causes it wrong. So they have to do it's not straightforward, but I can tell you it's 40% of the incident that actually is Finch feature related.
Yeah, although I think his question is slightly more narrow, which is how often do we have something that was enabled by default in code?
Yeah, exactly.
That then hit stable and you said, oh no, disable via Finch 100%. How often does that happen?
I think in the incident, it's about in the 40%, it's about maybe 30% of total, and but when we have the major incident, 2/3 of them is Finch feature that having that. But I'm not sure if it's 100% says we just killed it and then we just by default, because it's 100% launch cause it sometimes cause in couple releases. Like in one release they have a kill switch, in another release they have another kill switch. The Finch feature that they correlate to each other actually causing the problem. So if you say you can say in the second time when we enable the second feature and by default causing the problem. So that will be a 2/3 of the major incident.
Yeah, so in this case, it feels like it would be nice to have more communication about this, just so we can.
Right. So actually, I think there's a lot of space we can invest to actually detect issue early if we have a lot of the Finch feature related issue, like Rick said in the presentation, and if we can collect those data and do a lot of analyze to it, we actually can finding those major incidents and a lot of OMs much earlier.
The problem with the Finch rollouts from an end user perspective is we've over the course of 15 years trained users to be Chrome changes on the version change.
Yeah.
And so it's very clear when something is enabled by default, to a web developer, oh, these users are seeing a breakage on 129 versus 128. It's a Chrome bug. And so like typically, you will receive like these bug reports like within a week. Like when we ramp something to like 10% stable via Finch, like we're lucky if we get a bug report at that stage, because like from a web development perspective, they're just like, it's broken for a random subset of users. I don't know what's going on. And so, yeah, rolling out via Finch is the worst.
Certainly for like new web platform features, I agree. I think rolling out for Finch,
even behavior changes, like any behavior change is bad.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, to beat the dead horse, like, yeah, if you made the bisect super easy for external people, including pick up my Finch config, maybe some of those websites, maybe you could get trained to like tell my user, click, 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 and here's your Finch.
We would have to spend so much time and effort, like from a DevRel perspective, like retraining like all web dev to think in that manner is the problem. Because like, it's not just us, like, Safari has, trained all of like their, web developers that use Safari. They're like, oh, feature changes happen on like a major Safari release. And so like, for better or worse, like the whole ecosystem is on that mental model. If we like diverge and go, no, everything, you have to now think about it in this way. That's just like an extra cognitive load. That's just not right.
But it is already diverged, isn't it?
What's that?
It is already disconnected, the reality versus the expectation.
It is, but like we're harming, like we don't get like these reports early enough when things roll out by Finch.
I think there's a trade-off, right? If it's something that we want to test with our own telemetry, like Finch is invaluable.
Yeah,
like if we're making like a performance improvement, right?
Yep.
Or hey, we're switching a major subsystem over from one thing to another. We want to see the impact on crash rates, right?
Well,
like,
I mean, like I've done that with layout engine. Doing that is bad. Like the way to do it is like for that specific case, it's like doing a 1% rollout. Just so that you get like telemetry on like what the crash rate is.
Yeah.
And then the next release you do a reverse Finch where you like keep a 1% fallback group and you can like still compare and get performance data. But like we tried like rolling like a layout system change out by Finch. That was the worst.
Yeah.
So it was better just to enable it by default and hope you got the coverage and pre-release channel.
Yep. And like it's kind of the sort of like what we saw is like if we get like a bug report on dev, like there's probably going to be like 10 on beta and then like 100 on like stable. It sort of goes in like an order of magnitude step. So like if we got like none on dev, like if we got 1 on beta, maybe we'll get 10 on stable. If we got none on beta, we'll maybe get like 1 or 2, like a handful on stable. So yeah, even like doing 50-50 rollout on the pre-release channels is dangerous, just because we don't get enough coverage. Anyway, that's my story. Don't roll out big changes by Finch.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so at TPAC last year, we talked about deprecations, and there was this idea floating around of giving users the UI to say, this website looks funky. And then we'd be able to somehow collect that and then potentially also report that to the site. We talked about like reporting that to the site in the context of deprecations could be interesting, but it could also feed into our own, like, essentially avoid the need of asking users to go to Chrome crbug.com, file an issue. That is scary. Clicking a button is less scary. Maybe this is an avenue where we can get some data and shorten the feedback loop. At the same time, like, I don't know if users will actually do that, but I'm wondering if something happened with this idea since TPAC last year.
So the one place I know this has happened is with Privacy Sandbox and third-party cookie settings. So I think we've had a lot of success actually using, I think part of the concern from a UX perspective is, we have the feedback, but anyway, there's some concern about, what's actually in it for users, what's actionable for them, right? So in the Privacy Sandbox case, they're able to say, oh, turn third-party cookies back on for this site. Something's broken, I'm turning third-party cookies back on. I think that's actually been a really useful signal for us to learn which sites have problems with third-party cookies. But I don't know if we could do that more generally. Certainly I mean, we have the feedback system today. Generally, we use to send feedback about Chrome. You could imagine maybe we could try to correlate, try to encourage people to send feedback about websites. I don't know if we can find signals in that or not. Vivian spent a bunch of time trying to look at different forms of signals. Could we automate, we also talked, maybe it was that TPAC or maybe it was a previous TPAC. We talked about unhandled exception rate, for example, and during journaling early stable. And this is something the Privacy Sandbox team has also looked at, is hey, maybe with third-party cookies off, maybe we might see more unhandled exceptions on some sites, and that might be a signal for us.
Yeah, so we have actually set up a web breakage dashboard. Actually, it's continue monitor the user happiness, the JavaScript exceptions, the HTTP errors, and how engaged people with the site, how frequently they abandon the site, all this, to actually aggregate all of this to become a web breakage score to monitor in every release and early release. We A/B comparison with previous stable, see if anything is actually go wrong for a specific website with a very bad web breakage score. But we did that for a couple of release, but we haven't been able to effectively finding that actually something go wrong, and it will direct indicate it's Chrome's change actually break it.
I think there's a lot of noise, right? And
Yeah.
It's really hard to get the signal out of the noise. I think it's still possible. I just think it's a hard problem. Maybe an academic problem we could engage some AI researchers on or something.
I feel that if you I feel the problem somehow is with the UKM, all these metrics we're actually using right now, it's not 100% to the accurate to the problem. And I often see in several incidents we see, for example, the password or that they build some unique it's a UMA metrics that's specific for the feature that develop. It's very analyze the angle that they update that feature, and then that specific metrics actually call the issue. However, the incident got slipped through because that issues that metrics didn't get checking in time. But that metrics actually give a spot on indicator to that. And we also see several others, but that's mostly not on the web. But there is in the UKM, I feel it's possible if we can find some very specific metrics that actually make sense to certain upgrade we made. We can actually finding.
Mm-hmm.
But to your knowledge, we already did some experiment for the existing one that wasn't super effective at the moment.
So I see we're a couple minutes over. We're into coffee break. I just want to give Kiwi, I saw your hand was up and you had a couple comments in the chat. Did you want to make any last comments?
Oh, no, appreciate it. Yeah, I was just curious. So I'm a member of the Electron team, and we try to be really proactive about reporting regressions up, and you all are very quick to address them. So thank you for that. I was just curious on the Finch discussion. Is there an easy place for an external, non-Google person to see the status of a given Finch trial?
Don't think so. I think we consider that.
Yeah, I would love to have a timeline of enabling, disabling.
Yeah.
Maybe because of security reasons, you don't need to disclose up to the last day, maybe, but having a timeline that we can check and correlate with.
Yeah, after a while.
Get a report or something, it will be really, really great.
But that's only, these are all of your products you're talking about are downstream Chromium, right? They're not using our Finch configuration. Is that just because?
No, but we are taking, if a regression is happening,
right?
We use Chromium upstream, and then we may not be running the very same cases that run.
Yeah. Right. So you probably don't need our full Finch logs of all the A/B experiments we're running. I think we think of that as kind of sensitive and maybe not something we'd be willing to make public. But what you probably want to know is things that are 100%, right, or 99%.
The more than things is more like the origin trials test.
Yeah.
They are entering in everybody for all the regular users. And when you actually fetch a Chromium version and you try, you are going to try with that configuration. That is a specific version, but with a specific set of features that are coming from this configuration that is not
what you get when you compile Chromium instead of Chrome by default.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good piece of feedback, right? We kind of use Finch for two different things, right? We use it for A/B experiments, but then we also use it for controlling rollouts and the controlling rollouts, what is actually on for most Chrome users versus what is off is probably something we should explore whether we can make that more public.
Yes, it doesn't happen a lot, but
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah. Especially the kill switch. I think
you say, okay,
kill switches are rare enough.
Reduce the issue, and then suddenly you realize the problem is that with the same versions or even older versions is not reproducing, but it was reproducing for us. And the only change that happened basically it was that in upstream something got disabled.
Yeah.
Because an issue was detected, and in our case we were trying with the feature enabled, it was crashing. Well, come on, I cannot map exactly when things went wrong. In the end, it happens to be that we roll out to the version where by default in one site it's enabled by default in the common features, but then it's actually modified by the trials.
All right, we're 5 minutes of the coffee break. Let's cut here. I appreciate we can continue to discuss. I appreciate ideas. What I appreciate even more than ideas, because there are lots of ideas, is people who want to put time and money into helping make Chromium more reliable. So if that's you or your organization, let me know. Maybe we can, maybe there's something we can do. I think, yeah. So thank you very much.